It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco on a happy hour Friday, recapping the week of OTAs. A lot of news at the NovaCare Complex this week that we will take a look back on, get Andrew's thoughts on, as well of what's next for this team. As we talked yesterday with Adam Kaplan, Brandon Brooks. You know, Brandon Brooks said two things yesterday that I thought really stood out. And I want to get Andrew's take on this. Because Jeff Mosher had said in the offseason, hey, the Eagles are would try to trade him. Brooks admitted yesterday that the team did, in fact, try to trade him. But what I thought, Andrew, stood out about what Brandon Brooks said yesterday was, I tore my Achilles before, and when I came back, I was the best player in the league, best guard in the league, period. So he sounds like he's highly confident that he will come back and be the same player that he was before this injury because he's already done it once before.
Yeah, the history's there. I mean, there's something to that. I mean, he works very diligently throughout the recovery process, and he's made some remarkable recoveries. So, I mean, he's still at the peak of his game, still very much in his prime, and one of the top guards in football when healthy. Yeah,
so when you hear that, and, obviously we've seen him, he's going to be 32 years old at the start of the season. We've talked a lot about the offensive line. They obviously drafted Landon Dickerson, and I'd like to also hear your opinion on how you think he might be used this year. But if they get the Brandon Brooks that they've had over his tenure in Philadelphia. And it's funny, I'm looking through these Pro Football Focus rankings, and there he is, Jason Kelce, number 5 on the list, still one of the best centers in football. And then you go over to the tackle rankings, and there he is, still top 10, Lane Johnson. The Brandon Brooks thing, I think, if he's the same player with Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks on that right side, and Jason Kelce back, you start to wonder what this offense can look like.
Yeah, there's no question about it. The three players that you mentioned still can play at an all-pro level if healthy, and they're going to be welcome additions to the offensive line, of course. And it really puts the Eagles in the conversation for having one of the top offensive lines in football. But the key is always health. Obviously, they haven't had the cleanest bill of health in recent years, so that's going to be the big question here. And now they actually have young depth that was actually forged by fire last year, so should they have to step in for a game or two, now they're ready. But I think there's just a lot of talent in the starting unit and also in the depth unit that they have this year they didn't quite have in the past years.
How do you envision – I know it's offensive linemen are tough to kind of, in OTAs. The skill guys, you see them running around, you see them doing things. We heard Reagor said, hey, I might be in the slot a little bit more this year. So you kind of get a feel of that. Offensive line's a little bit more difficult. But how do you see Landon Dickerson and what they might do with him at training camp?
Well, I think he'll be eased into training camp. There's certainly no rush. Obviously, you want to always keep the long-term picture in mind with him. I think he will be ready by the start of the season, if I had to guess. But I think if the Eagles had their way, he wouldn't see a single snap this year. Only if an Isaac Seumalo regressed or, if there was an injury at either guard position or center, I think he would be the first guy in there. But I think they want to save some mileage on him and not use him until they have to. And I think next year he's going to be ready to take over one of those spots, most likely center when Jason Kelce retires.
So you envision Dickerson being – and I ask this because as I was looking at Brandon Brooks, who, comes out and says, hey, I was the best guard in the league, period, when I came back. They can get out of that contract because they obviously tried to trade him. He admitted that. So would he be there as the replacement for Kelce, or do they want to slip him in as a replacement for Brooks?
I think I have to think that the long-term plan is to put him in there for Jason Kelce, but it's a luxury knowing that he can play either guard spot as well.
Yeah,
I mean, there's also guys like Nate Herbig there that has center guard versatility. Jack Driscoll can play center guard or right tackle. So I mean, they have some options.
Yeah, I was going to say I know that Driscoll's a guy that they like, and he's kind of versatile. Do you look at Driscoll as more of a tackle or a guard?
I think long term he's going to be more of a guard.
And Herbig, does he play? Is he more of just an interior guard, or does he have any center in him?
Let's not forget he was a center at Stanford.
Right.
So I think that the fact that he was able to sort of transition, become a decent guard, a decent starting guard when he was kind of thrown in there last season. I mean, he now has versatility. He cross-trained at both spots, but I think he has much more of a center background than he does guard.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, looking at Eagles OTAs. Yeah, if you look at Jason Kelce, by the way, the rankings came out from Pro Football Focus for the upcoming season, and he was number 5 on that list again. I mean, even though, did it feel like Kelce was as good this year as he's been in the past? I mean, he played this year with a knee injury, an elbow problem. I think he had an ankle problem at some point, and yet there he is. He's still one of the best guys in the league. But is Kelce still playing at the same level to you?
Yes, he is. He has plenty of juice left in the tank, and when you saw moments where many may have thought he was showing signs of regression, I mean, look to the left, look to the right of him, who was surrounding him last season, and he was responsible for kind of being the glue to keep that offensive line together. So I think all things considered, he definitely rose to the occasion and showed that he still has some mileage left.
All right. Everybody thinks that it will be Dillard against Mailata, right, at left tackle. Kind of handicap and break how you see that left tackle kind of playing out. I mean, do you have a favorite over the other? Do you think it's 50-50? Is there a guy that the team wants to win that job? How do you kind of see that one?
Well, I think Andre Dillard's going to get the first opportunity to win that spot. He only can play left tackle. He struggled at right when they threw him out there. I don't know that he can play guard at a very high level. So I think he's either left tackle or bust. But I think that he'll get every opportunity. But I think that Jordan Mailata is the far better player and showed more encouraging signs than we've ever seen from Andre Dillard since he's been in the NFL. And taking that into consideration from where Jordan Mailata came from and his lack of NFL experience, I think that speaks volumes to his development and his skill set. So, I mean, I think he's ultimately going to run away with that. Which then begs the question, what do you do with Andre Dillard should that scenario kind of transpire?
I was literally going to follow that because I don't know what you do with Dillard then. I mean, do you keep a guy on the team that literally plays he only plays one spot on the line? I think we found that out, right?
Yeah. And not very well. So I think that what could happen is that you're going to see teams, there's always a shortage of offensive line play in training camp especially, and I think you might see something in August where a team contacts the Eagles maybe, or the Eagles throw a feeler out there saying, hey, we have Andre Dillard here. We know you have an offensive line. You're struggling on the offensive line. You're a little light in numbers there. What can it take to, pry away maybe one of your corners or something like that? Yeah. And maybe you might see a player-for-player deal or something of that nature late in the summer.
Hey, what did you think about how Reagor, among others, but Reagor really glowingly talking about how the coaching staff puts a big focus on wide receivers? I mean, it sounded to me as Reagor was like, man, this is really refreshing that there's so much focus on what we're doing at practice. I don't know if he's saying the other staff did not, but he certainly made it seem like this staff had a much bigger focus on that position. Did you take it that way?
Yeah, and it's not really a surprise when you look at Kevin Patullo's background, Nick Sirianni's background, and Aaron Moorhead. You have three guys right there that are deeply rooted in that position, and Nick Sirianni has been everywhere he's went, he's developed pass catchers, right? So I think that you're starting to see that enthusiasm, these creative ideas, and the emphasis on details that maybe these players haven't seen over the last year or two. And you're just getting all these new ideas and different inputs. And I think you're starting to see a re-energized, revitalized receiving core that's excited to kind of tackle whatever they throw at them and hopefully become better players. And it kind of, you start to see that transpire on the football field.
Yeah, there's no question that I would imagine, Andrew, that all eyes will be on Reagor and, of course, Devonta Smith. Like those two and the way that they are utilized, and I guess the development of this whole core. I mean, if they don't bring in another receiver, and this is just the group they have, this is a very young group of guys, but it almost is the most intriguing with the most upside as well because of the fact that you have 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick sitting here, and it's the ultimate, does this coaching staff get more out of this group than the previous one? If you were a betting man, would you think that this coaching staff is going to get more out of Reagor and the rest of this crew than the previous one did?
Well, it's kind of hard to get less production out of the talent that was there. So, I mean, I would have to say if you're an Eagles fan or if you're Jeffrey Lurie, you hope so because you've invested so much draft capital in revitalizing the position and restocking it and getting young guys in place to really take over that position for the next, 8 to 10 years if all goes well. And there's just a lot of firepower there. On paper, you have different types of receivers with various skill sets that kind of complement each other. I mean, I personally think that Jalen Reagor is going to have a sort of a breakout year, which is, which many expected to see last year. But just based on how the coaching staff should be using him, he's got his second year in the NFL. Remember, everybody transitions to the NFL at different speeds. So I think that you're going to start to see the wheels turn for Jalen Reagor. You're going to have 3 different coaches in his ear, and I think that all the receivers that they have kind of complement each other. Now it's just taking to the coaching, and letting that materialize on the football field.
Yeah, and people forget, maybe they don't, or don't really care, is he did have the injury issues, and for whatever reason, it doesn't help, Andrew, that you had Justin Jefferson. And then, of course, there's this whole conversation whether they might move Reagor to have – they're not going to move him to the slot exclusively. He might play more in the slot and just kind of move around. And then people are like, well, you didn't take Jefferson because he was supposed to be only a slot guy. So Jefferson doing what he did, coupled with the injuries, certainly didn't help Reagor, and the people's thoughts of him. And quite frankly, that might never go away if Jefferson continues to be the type of player that we saw last year, which I don't have any reason to believe that he wouldn't. But it'll definitely be interesting to see if this staff just utilizes Reagor better. So would you say his lack of production came more of not being utilized correctly, or the injuries, or just, hey, he just needs a little bit more, just wasn't ready for the pro as fast as some others guys were?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a combination because he's not the first young receiver that we've sort of seen go out there look like he's swimming a little bit, right? I mean, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside has been on record saying that there's a lot of times where he'd go into the game not knowing what his role was going to be or what position he was going to be playing. So I think you have a lot of these young guys that were sort of like information overload. Obviously, some of these issues were Jalen's because he wasn't running NFL caliber routes. He dropped some footballs. I think he struggled with the pressure of the Philadelphia fan base. So, I mean, all that is sort of part of the transition to the NFL. And I think now when you sort of turn the page, take what you've got, what you need to improve on and what you did well from your rookie season, get with your coaching staff, work on those different nuances and become an all-around better player and just really block out the noise. I think that you're going to see a vastly different player. I just think it was a culmination of things last year that sort of prompted that lackluster rookie year.
I hope you're right about that because I did like Reagor at TCU. I was the fan. Obviously he wasn't of the group of guys that were drafted in that first round. He wasn't nearly as well known or heralded as well as the Ruggs and the Judys and obviously Jefferson. They all played in the SEC. So when Reagor was the pick, it was a little bit of a head turner, and I kind of feel bad for the guy in a way that he gets hurt, and then Jefferson has this big year. It's kind of out of his control, but all eyes will be on him for a bounce-back season. All right, Andrew DiCecco is with us here, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, the Eagles OTAs continue. They're continuing this week. And, obviously, another one of the things that I found to be interesting this week was the talk – this team is obviously not adding, yet, any corner at that spot over there, but the linebacker spot. So we know they're still weak there, but would you consider this team still weak at the linebacker position? That was a huge gaping problem. Eric Wilson spoke yesterday, said some interesting things. We had Adam on yesterday. He mentioned that Jordan Hicks could be a guy that they might be interested in if they can figure out a deal there. But do you look at the Eagles linebacking core and still say that's an area they need to add to?
Yeah, it went from bottom tier to sort of middle of the road. There's T.J. Edwards is a limited player, but he can play. He can confidently give you snaps and produce. Alex Singleton had a breakout season when he was kind of thrust into the spotlight. Now we see if that was that a flash in the pan, or can he put it together? And this is sort of the player that he is. Can he be that player that he showed that he flashed last season? Eric Wilson is the most well-rounded, in my opinion. Can do a lot more. Can be a three-down linebacker for this team. Then you have Sean Bradley, who's more so of a special teams player. Doesn't run particularly well, doesn't cover a lot of ground. And Davion Taylor, who's still largely a project until we see otherwise. I mean, they have a collection of guys that, outside of Eric Wilson, they're complementary pieces. They're not necessarily three-down linebackers.
Well, if Eric Wilson's your best linebacker, then you're probably – you said middle of the road. If Eric Wilson – now, I like Wilson. I think he's in today's game, I think he is a solid, coverage guy. He had interceptions, he blitzes, so he's got kind of an all-around today's linebacker game. But if he's your best linebacker, I have no problem with them trying to find another guy to complement him.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an Eric Wilson and a Jordan Hicks and a Singleton as your top three, and then you have different pieces you can sprinkle in, like a Davion Taylor here, maybe a Jernard Avery if he's able to stick as a pass-rushing outside linebacker, T.J. Edwards on rundowns. I think you have guys you can sort of plug in, and it makes your defense all the more strong for it.
Yeah. All right. Football season feels like it's right around the corner with these OTAs here, and there's so much going on. We know June 1 is going to be a big day as well, as that day is going to be, there's going to be some more signings. You're going to have some more veteran names that are going to be out there. And I guess we can find out at that point whether the Eagles want to get back down, get in that road, and Andrew, of finding would you imagine that they are waiting to see who is available at that defensive back spot?
I mean, yeah, you have to think. Just looking about who they have. I mean, Kavon Seymour, Devontae Maddox, Craig James, Meters, who they just added, Josiah Scott, who they just added, Graylin Arnold. I mean, that's a motley crew of corners after Darius Slay. I think they need to find a way to bolster that somehow, because that second cornerback spot is going to get picked on relentlessly otherwise. And, I think the Eagles will investigate that after June 1st. And then I also mentioned there's also Zach Ertz that's on the roster. There's also Andre Dillard. We still have to wait and see what happens there. So I wouldn't rule out – I mean, I certainly think it's a strong possibility that they add to that position, and they really have to, because – it's a bottom-tier cornerback group right now. It's simple as that.
At DiCecco NFL, and, of course, football at 4 all season long here on the Sports Bash, all summer long, we should say. The NFL never takes a day off. Neither does football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which dropped Thursday at 6 a.m. The latest edition is out. Check that out with Adam and Jeff, and, of course, right here on the Football at 4, every day, 4 o'clock here on the Sports Bash. All right, Andrew, Happy Hour Friday. What's in your hand?
I'm just going with the tried and true Bud Light Platinum.
Wow, a little tried and true. I like that on Memorial Day weekend. Why not? Old Faithful, Bud Light Platinum. Faithful. There he goes. Andrew, appreciate the time as always, pal. We will catch up next week.
Have a good Memorial Day weekend, Mike.